Mark had worked on many alien stations before, but this one felt different. The corridors were quiet, almost too quiet, and the walls seemed to hum with a strange energy. He was on level 7, deep in the maintenance sector, checking a power relay that had been giving faulty readings for 2 days. His hands moved with practiced skill, adjusting wires, testing circuits, and logging the changes. It was supposed to be a simple job fix, the relay. Sign the report and get paid. But nothing about today was going to be simple. Across the room stood a tall containment chamber made of thick, transparent crystal. Inside, Mark saw the faint outline of a figure. The shape was humanoid, but glowing patterns ran across the skin like living tattoos. At first, he thought it was just a hologram, maybe part of a security display. Then the figure moved, pressing a hand against the crystal. Her eyes opened and locked on him. Before Mark could speak, a loud alarm cut through the air. A blinding pulse of white light burst from the relay panel. Throwing him backward, the lights flickered. The floor shook, and a deep rumble rolled through the station. The containment chamber hissed, steam pouring from its edges. With a sharp crack, the crystal split open. The figure stepped out, gasping for air, clutching her chest like she was in pain. Mark staggered to his feet, his ears ringing. What's happening? He shouted over the alarm. The alien girl stumbled forward, her glowing markings pulsing brighter. Her voice was strained, but her words were clear. It's too late. We're bound now. Mark blinked. Not understanding, bound. What are you talking about? Before she could answer, a burning sensation spread through his veins. It felt like liquid fire rushing through every nerve. His knees buckled and he fell against the wall, gasping. The station's AI voice boomed overhead, warning life bond. Protocol initiated, subjects identified. Human male, designation Mark Ryder, and alien designation Lyra Vashira, Royal Envoy. Life bond is permanent. Separation will result in immediate death of both parties. Mark's heart pounded. He didn't know what a life bond was, but it didn't sound like something he wanted. Around them, several aliens in armored suits entered the room, weapons raised. They froze when they saw the glowing lines connecting him and the alien girl like faint threads of light. One of them shouted something in a language Mark didn't know, but the tone was clear. This was bad. The alien girl, leery eyes, suddenly grabbed his wrist. Her grip was strong, almost painfully so. Move, she hissed, pulling him toward a side door. Mark stumbled after her, his mind spinning. Hey, wait. What's going on? No time. She snapped. If they catch us, we're both dead. They burst into the maintenance tunnels, the sound of heavy boots and shouting voices behind them. The walls here were narrow, lit only by the red emergency lights. Mark's head still throbbed from the blast. He could feel her panic through the strange burning link inside him. Every time she breathed faster, his chest tightened. Every time she stumbled, his own legs felt weaker. What is this bond thing? He demanded as they ran. She glanced back, her eyes glowing faintly. Sacred law. Once two beings are bound, their lives are shared. Pain, strength, even thoughts can pass between them. Mark shook his head. That's insane. It's also unbreakable, she said bitterly, unless one of us dies. They reached a junction. Lyra yanked him left just as a squad of soldiers appeared from the right. Energy bolts sizzled past them, burning holes in the walls. Mark ducked instinctively, his heart racing. He'd been in dangerous situations before, but this was different. It wasn't just his life on the line. If he died, she died too, and from the way she was dragging him. She clearly had no plan except keep running. They finally stopped inside a dark, dusty storage bay. Lyra slammed the door shut and pressed a panel to lock it. Mark leaned against a crate. Breathing hard, I was fixing a relay, he said, still trying to process it. Now I'm apparently married to an alien princess or something. Her expression darkened. Not married, life bonded, and I am no princess, though my life is. Complicated. Mark rubbed his face. Complicated. Lady, there are armed guys outside trying to kill us, and apparently, I'll die if you do. She met his gaze, her voice low. Then stay close, human, because from this moment on, your survival is my survival. He didn't know if that was a promise or a threat. But the weight in her voice told him one thing: whatever had just happened. There was no going back. Outside, footsteps grew closer. The soldiers were searching the bay. And it was only a matter of time before they found them. Mark's pulse quickened. Lyra's glowing patterns brightened as she whispered, "When I tell you to run, run, don't think. Don't look back." Mark swallowed hard, feeling the bond between them hum like a live wire. Something told him that whatever was coming next would change both their lives forever. The storage bay door shook under the impact of heavy boots, each slam sending a jolt through Mark's chest. Through the bond, he could feel Lyra's sharp focus, her heart pounding, her muscles tensing like a predator about to strike. She was scanning the dark corners of the room, eyes darting over crates and shadowed alcoves. Mark followed her gaze and realized she wasn't looking for a hiding spot, she was looking for an exit. The problem was, there wasn't one. The door's lock gave a warning beep, and Lyra muttered something in her own language, the tone dripping. With frustration, Mark didn't understand the words. But he guessed it wasn't, "Everything is fine." The door began to glow along its seams as the soldiers outside prepared to cut through. Lyra suddenly gripped his arm, hard enough to make him wince. "You can run, yes?" she asked, her voice urgent. Mark gave a shaky laugh. "Not if it's faster than whatever those guys are." She didn't smile. Instead, she pulled him toward the far wall where a metal panel was half loose. With one sharp kick, she tore it off and revealed a narrow maintenance shaft, barely big enough to crawl through. Mark stared at it. "You're kidding?" Her glowing eyes met his. "Do you want to live?" They slipped inside, the metal scraping against Mark's shoulders as he crawled after her. Behind them, the door burst open and alien voices shouted in alarm. Energy blasts lit the shaft from behind, the heat brushing past his boots. Mark felt her urgency pumping into him through the bond, forcing him to move faster than his aching muscles wanted. He realized then she wasn't just dragging him along. She was pushing her own strength into his body. The shaft opened into a larger tunnel. Lined with humming pipes, Lyra didn't slow down, weaving left and right as if she knew this place like the back of her hand. Mark's lungs burned, but somehow he didn't collapse. She finally stopped beside a large vent and pried it open, the stale air rushing past them. When they stepped out, the world around them had changed. They were in the underlevel of the station, a place Mark had only heard rumors about. The floor was wet with condensation, the walls covered in graffiti written in a dozen alien scripts. Dim lights flickered above, casting long, eerie shadows across the narrow alleys. Figures watched them. From doorways and upper balconies, shady traders, mercenaries, and people who didn't want to be found. This was the kind of place where you could buy anything or lose everything. Lyra slowed her pace just enough to speak without gasping. "My people will not stop," she said, her voice like steel. "They will track us until we are dead." Mark's mind reeled. Why? What's so bad about this bond thing? It's not like we chose it. Her eyes hardened. "Because I was promised to another. And not just any one, a warlord with enough power to start a galactic war if he's insulted." The weight of her words settled on him. "So, let me guess," Mark said grimly. "Me being alive right now is one giant insult." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Exactly." Before he could respond, a group of shadowy figures stepped out of the mist ahead of them, blocking the path. They weren't soldiers, but the weapons in their hands were just as deadly. Mark reached instinctively for the wrench strapped to his tool belt. Teat was the only thing he had. Through the bond, he felt Lyra's sudden surge of aggression, her body coiling like a spring. The leader of the group stepped forward, his voice low and mocking. Well, a human and a royal envoy walking into my territory, he said. That's either a very bold move, or a very stupid one. Mark kept his grip tight on the wrench, his mind racing somewhere deep inside. The bond pulsed again, like a living thing waiting to be unleashed. The leader's smirk widened as he circled them, the other armed figures fanning out like wolves. Mark's grip on the wrench tightened, the cold metal slick in his sweaty palm. Through the bond, he felt Lyra's muscles tense, her heartbeat steady but sharp. She wasn't afraid, and that calm was bleeding into him. It made his own fear turn into something different, something dangerous. The leader tilted his head at Lyra. Royal envoy, aren't you a little far from your precious council chambers? She didn't answer, her gaze fixed on his weapon hand. The man chuckled. And a human. Funny, I didn't think your kind could afford to walk down here without losing a kidney. Mark said nothing, but his jaw clenched. He didn't know the rules of this place. But he knew one thing: if they backed down, they were done. One of the thugs made the mistake of stepping too close. Lyra moved like lightning, twisting his arm and slamming him against the wall. Mark felt the surge of movement in his own body, the sudden burst of strength and speed. It was like the bond was amplifying both of them. The rest of the group hesitated. Suddenly, unsure, "Run," Lyra ordered without looking back. Mark didn't argue. They bolted down a side alley, the sounds of pursuit exploding behind them. Blaster fire cracked through the air, sizzling past their heads. Mark felt the heat of one shot graze Lyra's shoulder, and instantly his own shoulder burned. They dove behind a stack of old cargo containers. Mark's breath came in ragged gasps, the pain in his shoulder pulsing in time with hers. She pressed a hand against the burn, her jaw tight. "That's how it works," she said between breaths. "We share pain just as we share strength." Mark shook his head. "Great, so every time you get hurt, I get a free sample." Her lips twitched, almost like a smile. But the moment vanished as the sound of boots drew closer. They had no time to rest. Lyra pulled him toward a narrow service hatch on the ground. Wrenching it open, the air below was thick and damp. They climbed down into the darkness, ceiling the hatch above them just as shadows passed overhead. The tunnel smelled of rust and stale water. Mark's boots splashed in the shallow muck as they moved. "Where are we going?" he asked. "Somewhere they won't follow," she replied, but her tone held no comfort. Through the bond, he felt a flicker of worry, small, but enough to chill him. They emerged into a chamber filled with humming machinery, the air heavy with static. Strange blue light glowed from the walls, reflecting off Lyra's markings. Mark reached out to touch one of the humming panels, but she grabbed his wrist. "Don't," she warned. "This is a power nexus. One surge could fry you." From the inside out, her eyes softened slightly. "And if you die?" "So do I." Before Mark could respond, a strange sensation hit him. It wasn't fear or pain or strength, it was curiosity, and it wasn't his. Through the bond, he was feeling her thoughts more clearly than ever. Flashes of images crossed his mind: alien cities, strange skies, her face younger and unmarked by war. He stumbled back, gasping, "What the hell was that?" She hesitated. "The bond is growing stronger. Soon, we may not be able to hide anything from each other." Mark didn't know if that scared him or fascinated him. But before he could think too much about it, the sound of boots echoed in the distance again. They weren't safe yet, and something told him they might never be. The echo of boots grew louder, bouncing off the metal walls until it felt like the sound was coming from every direction. Mark's pulse quickened. But through the bond, he could feel Lyra's mind sharpening, calculating. She scanned the chamber, and then pulled him toward a narrow passage lit by a single flickering light. They slipped through just as shadows appeared at the far entrance. Weapons raised, the passage led them into a wider hall lined with steel doors, all sealed tight. Before Mark could ask where they were, the hall lights snapped on with a harsh glare. Voices barked orders, and a dozen armored soldiers closed in from both sides. Mark froze, the wrench in his hand suddenly feeling useless. Lyra stepped in front of him, her back straight, her voice cold. "If he dies, I die," she said. Loudly, "Is that what the royal court wants?" The soldiers hesitated, glancing at each other. Then the crowd parted, and a tall alien in dark command armor walked forward. His face was scarred, his eyes sharp and unyielding. "Lyra Vashira," he said, his voice like gravel. "You have dishonored your vow to the warlord." Lyra's tone didn't waver. "The bond was an accident. Killing him will kill me. And that will not please your warlord either." The commander studied her for a long, heavy moment. Then his gaze shifted to Mark, eyes narrowing like he was measuring a problem. Finally, he gestured sharply, and the soldiers moved in. Mark tensed, ready to fight, but Lyra's hand on his arm stopped him. "We're not dead yet," she whispered. They were marched through the hall and into a towering chamber filled with dim, nicked cold light. A single reinforced cell door stood at the far end. The soldiers shoved them inside, the door locking with a metallic thud. Mark paced the small space, running his hand over the cold walls. "This doesn't look like we're not dead," he muttered. Lyra sat on the floor, crossing her legs. "They won't kill us until the warlord decides what to do," she said. Mark turned to face her. "And what exactly does that mean?" Her gaze didn't leave his. "It means we're running out of time." He could feel her determination burning through the bond hard. Focused and unshakable, somewhere deep inside, Mark knew she was already planning something dangerous. And if the connection between them meant anything, he was about to be part of it, whether he wanted to or not. Hours passed in the cold cell. The only sounds were the faint hum of the station's engines and the occasional footsteps of a guard outside. Mark sat with his back against the wall, staring at the ceiling. Through the bond, he felt Lyra's steady breathing, but beneath it was something else, a quiet, deliberate tension. She wasn't resting. She was waiting then, without warning. She opened her eyes and whispered, "When I move, follow me, no hesitation." Mark didn't even have time to ask before the cell lights flickered. A loud alarm blared, and the floor shook beneath them. Lyra was on her feet instantly, pressing her hands against the wall panel. Mark watched in disbelief as glowing lines spread from her fingertips into the metal. The door lock clicked open with a hiss. How he began, but she cut him off. "Later. Move." They slipped into the corridor, the chaos of the alarm masking their escape. Guards ran past them toward the upper levels, shouting orders to secure the main hangar. Lyra pulled Mark into a side passage, ducking into the shadows just as two soldiers stormed by. He could feel her heart pounding, but it wasn't fear, it was the rush of a plan in motion. They were getting out. They reached a service ladder that climbed straight up through the heart of the station. Mark's hands burned as he climbed, every muscle screaming halfway up. The ladder shook violently as the sound of blaster fire erupted below. Someone had spotted them. Lyra reached the top first and yanked him through a hatch. Sealing it behind them, they were in a dimly lit docking bay filled with small transport ships. Lyra sprinted toward a sleek freighter, its hull marked with the symbol of a smuggler crew. Mark recognized it instantly. "I know this ship. I've worked on it." "That's why we're taking it," she replied without slowing. The ramp lowered as they approached, revealing a stocky alien with a cybernetic eye. Mark Ryder. The smuggler grinned. Didn't expect to see you running with royal trouble. Long story, Mark said, already moving up the ramp. The smuggler shrugged. Then let's make it a fast getaway. The ship roared to life, lifting from the deck just as shouts and blaster fire filled the bay. Mark dropped into a seat, breathing hard as the freighter shot into open space. Through the viewport, the station grew smaller, but streaks of light appeared behind them. The royal fleet was already in pursuit. Lyra's voice was steady, but her eyes were grim. They will follow until one of us is dead. Mark met her gaze, the weight of her words. Sinking in, this wasn't just an escape, it was the beginning of a chase they might never outrun. The stars stretched into thin lines as the freighter jumped into hyperspace. Mark sank back into the seat, his muscles aching from the climb and the chase. Lyra sat across from him, her eyes fixed on the swirling light outside the viewport. Through the bond, he could feel a strange heaviness in her thoughts. It wasn't fear this time. Was something deeper, something that felt like resignation. What aren't you telling me? He asked quietly. She looked at him for a long moment before answering. The bond will not last forever. Mark frowned. I thought you said it was permanent. It is, she said softly. But without stabilizing it, the energy will burn through our bodies. Within months, we will both be dead. The smuggler's voice came over the cum from the cockpit. We've got a problem, fuel cells are low. Nearest port is an old science outpost. Might be crawling with people who want your heads? Mark glanced at Lyra. Science outpost. Could it help? Her expression hardened. Yes, there may be a machine there, one that can break the bond. For a moment, the idea felt like a lifeline. But then her next words hit him like a punch. If we use it, it will erase every memory we have shared since the accident. Mark stared at her. You're saying we'd go back to being strangers? She nodded slowly. It would save our lives. But it would end whatever this is. He didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted freedom. To wake up without feeling her heartbeat in his chest. But another part, one he didn't want to admit, was terrified of losing that connection. Even now, as he looked at her across the cabin, he could feel the faint echo of her thoughts, conflicted, uncertain, but not cold. The ship shuddered as it dropped. Out of hyperspace, through the viewport, a lonely station floated in the darkness, its hull scarred and patched with mismatched metal. This is it, the smuggler said, guiding them in. Lyra rose to her feet, her voice low. Once we step inside, we have to decide life apart or death together. Mark felt the bond hum between them, a constant reminder that his fate was tied to hers as the docking clamps locked into place. He realized this wasn't just a choice about survival. It was a choice about who he wanted to be when this was over. The air inside the science outpost was cold and dry, each step echoing down the empty corridor. Dust floated in the stale light as Mark and Lyra followed the smuggler toward a central chamber. The walls were lined with strange machines, most of them silent, but one stood in the center, a tall device covered in glowing panels and alien symbols. Mark felt its pull immediately, a strange vibration running through his chest. Lyra stopped just a few feet from it, her hands curling into fists. This is the machine, she said. Her voice barely above a whisper. The smuggler glanced between them. If you're going to do it fast. Scanners show incoming ships, and they're not here to talk. Mark stepped closer to the machine. The hum growing stronger in his ears, he turned to Lyra. We can be free of this. Her eyes met his, and through the bond, he felt a storm of emotion sphere. Longing and something warmer. Free, she repeated. But you won't remember me. And I won't remember you. All we'll have is the rest of our lives. Apart. Mark's hands hovered over the control panel. The station trembled as distant explosions shook the walls. The smuggler's voice rose sharply. "They're docking, now make your choice." Mark's pulse thundered in his ears. He thought of the first time he saw her in the containment chamber, the way her eyes locked on his. The moments they'd fought side by side, the pain they'd shared, the strange comfort of knowing someone. Elsa's heartbeat was inside him. He stepped back from the machine. "No," he said simply. Lyra's breath caught, and for a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then the wall behind them blew open. Soldiers flooding into the room with weapons. Raised, Mark grabbed her hand, the bond flaring between them like fire. They ran through the smoke and chaos, the smuggler shouting for them to hurry. Blaster bolts lit the air as they dove onto the freighter's ramp. The ship tore away from the outpost, the enemy fleet shrinking behind them. In the safety of the cabin, Lyra looked at him, her eyes fierce. "You had your chance to leave," she said. Mark managed a tired smile. "Leave? No, we're eternally bound now, and I'm not going anywhere." Through the bond, he felt her heart steady. A quiet warmth settling between them. Whatever came next, they would face it together.